Setting up a home photography studio. What's up YouTube, and welcome back to my channel. On this channel I talk about everything to do with food and drink photography. So if that interests you, click subscribe. In this video I'm going to be talking all about setting up a home photography studio. So this is going to be aimed more towards the sort of food, drink and product studios, but if you want to do portraits, you may find some of these tips useful as well. I was going to go through all of my tips for a home studio in one video, but as I was kind of writing down my bullet points and things like that, I realised there's actually quite a lot to talk about, so I'm going to have this set into two parts. This part, so part number one, is going to be all about choosing exactly where in our home we're going to set up our photography studio. The next part is going to be all about equipment and the extra little things you're going to need to consider and get for your photography studio. If you've been thinking about starting your own food, drink or product photography business, you might be really worried about the cost of running a studio. Like, I personally looked for commercial spaces as well. I know how expensive they can be, but you'd be surprised how few professional photographers actually have their own studios. For big jobs, a lot of people will rent them out, and a lot of people will just work from their home in a dedicated studio space. That is what I do. I'm lucky enough to have a really nice studio set up here in my home, included this little cozy area where I do these videos. If you're thinking of starting a photography business in 2022, you'll learn quite quickly how important it is to try and keep your costs down. And renting or buying a commercial photography studio is going to be a really big cost. So it's not one you need to think about straight away when you start working as a photographer. Creating an area in your home that is dedicated to your work and your shoots is going to be a really important thing to do, especially in the beginning when you need to be shooting quite a lot to build up your portfolio. So creating this space within your home is a really good way to save money in the long run, and it's going to be a lot closer at hand, so it's going to be a lot more easy to go and access it as soon as you have an idea. The other night I was watching TV and I had an idea for a shoot, so I just went and shot it. If I had to leave the house to go to my studio, that's a lot less likely going to happen because I'm quite lazy. When picking the space for your home photography studio, the first thing to think about is the space. How much space have you got? Have you got one corner of a large room that doesn't get used? Or have you maybe even got a spare bedroom that doesn't get used? I'm lucky enough to have a couple of different options here, so I've got one dedicated space at the side of my kitchen. And I've got one spare bedroom which I have as an office studio area as well. I understand not everybody is going to have the same amount of space going around. Some might have quite a big garage they can use, some might just have a very small corner in a dining room, but don't worry, whatever you've got will work great. The next thing to consider is light. If you're using artificial light, which I am a big fan of, I use artificial light for 99% of my shoots, but if you're using natural light, you're going to have to consider where the light is coming from in your dedicated space. If you've got a room and there's absolutely no light, it might be a great space, but it's not going to be the one for you unless you want to start investing in artificial light. You also need to think about which direction the sun is coming from with your window. If you want to shoot hard light photos, but you never get any direct sunlight, that's going to be very hard for you to do. You're going to get a lot more soft light coming in because the light isn't quite as direct, so it's not as hard. Everything like this is going to either affect what time of day you can shoot and the different effects you're going to get from the light in your shoot. If, like me, you use artificial light, that is great. You don't need to worry about the windows so much, but you are going to need to worry about the space that these will take up. If you've got one tiny little corner in a room, you're going to need to be able to move some furniture around to get your lights in, because they're not small, they're quite big, and sometimes you will need to pull them further away from your subject. It's also important to have enough light in a room to be able to see what you're shooting through your camera. If you use autofocus, you might struggle to get your camera to focus if it's too dark, and if there's too much light, you might have quite a hard time sort of cancelling this out with your settings on your camera for the artificial light. That's a whole different story in itself. But the lighting in a room is important no matter what lighting you're using. The next thing to consider when choosing your space for your home studio is the location of it. Do you have a space specifically the kitchen. In food photography, we are going to use the kitchen a lot of the time, pretty much nearly all of the time. It's also a really nice area to prepare food and drink. Do you have a space that you could use that's nearer to the kitchen? The easier it is to access the kitchen, the easier it's going to be to kind of bring food up and down and that sort of thing. Even though I've got this nice room for my studio, I tend not to shoot food here a lot because it is quite a trek to the kitchen. Another thing to think about location-wise is privacy. I've got 2 golden retrievers and luckily they are very well behaved. If I was shooting some food, they would not come and eat it. But if you've got pets and they would do that, or maybe children, and they're going to be in your way and distracting when you're doing a shoot, you are probably best to have a separate room so you can shut the door, or even maybe a baby gate, just something that you can keep yourself separate from distractions and people or pets that are going to eat the food that you are photographing. Unfortunately, if you're going to eat the food yourself, I've been known to do it, there's nothing you can do about that. The next thing to think about is storage. Do you have a room with maybe like a wardrobe in or a cupboard that's going to be able to keep all of this stuff out of the way? Or do you have maybe a different cupboard that you could use a corner of just to store some of your things? This stuff all kind of takes up quite a lot of room. Or is everything going to be able to be stored in a particular room? If you're using a corner in a dining room, you probably don't want your lights set up there 24/7. If you've got your own separate room, keeping them up is not going to be as much of a problem. So is there a cupboard in your house that you could dedicate to your photography equipment and all the extra things you need for food photography? That is it for the pointers on how to choose your photography space. Obviously, I've not been telling you exactly where to shoot because everybody's houses are different and everybody's going to have different priorities. If you shoot natural light, probably the most important thing to you would be the lighting bit. If you have 3 children and 4 dogs, the privacy bit is probably a bit more important to you. So take this video away and think about exactly what's more important to you, and then think about exactly where is best in your house for your studio. Let me know in the comments below, guys, if any of you decided exactly where you're going to have your home studio. And in next week's video, I'm going to be talking about all of the equipment and this extra things you're going to need to consider to build your home photography studio. Thank you very much, guys. Bye!